This is Business Decoded podcast with Ronnie Spellman. An informal chats with top business moguls as they share their stories of failure and success in a fun and relaxed way. Get entertained, educated, and unlock the secrets to success.
Welcome to Business Decoded with Ronnie Spellman. I have another fantastic guest that was introduced to me by a mutually good friend, Milli Brown. Welcome to Business Decoded. She's the CEO of Brown Books Publishing Group. I'm excited to have you here, Milli.
Well, I'm very excited to be here.
Yes.
Thank you for the invitation.
Well, I am amazed at what you've done in your career in publishing books and industries. How did you end up getting into book publishing? I'm not sure that was on my list of career options when I was looking at building a career, and this is amazing. I love books.
Well, don't we all? At least I hope we all love books. And I will share a little secret with you. I never had being a writer or being a publisher on my list when I was deciding on careers. That was something that I sort of backed into the publishing world, and that's maybe some advice that I would love for people to just consider, that you never, ever know where life is going to take you.
That's true.
When I moved to Dallas in 1990, I was in between careers for the first time in my life. And I was wondering what I was going to do with the rest of my life. And I decided that being a socialite was definitely not going to be it.
Right.
I tried that for about a minute, and I thought, okay, going to lunch every day is not challenging enough for me. So what was starting to happen was that people that I cared about, people that I had always known weren't going to live forever, were starting to pass away. And I think we all know that that's going to happen. But when it really starts happening, you start realizing that now that they're gone, all those stories that I thought I would never forget, I forgot.
Right.
And I started formulating some ideas for creating a company to help people record their stories. And that's where the idea from personal profiles came into mind. And I thought, I'm going to start a company that I'm going to go out and interview people about their life. And we will write the story of their life and print and bind just enough books to give out to friends and family so that they're never going to be forgotten. And that was just on, I thought it through. It wasn't a whim, but I thought everybody eventually is going to leave this earth. Right. And so my market is really everybody.
Right.
So I have to date this, was actually about 7 years before Ancestry.com was even.
I was going to ask.
Ancestry.com came later after personal profiles. And of course, I did it personally. So I would go out, and there was really, technology still was not something that everybody was using in 1990.
Right.
So I got a tape recorder and a briefcase, and I actually became a media darling because in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, I was interviewed by all the newspapers, the Dallas Morning News, the Dallas Times-Herald, the Fort Worth Star-Telegram.
Right.
I mean, everybody wanted to hear about my new company. And so the business just came flooding in. And as a one-man band, I was busy. Wow. I was very busy. So I was producing, and I will say that there was some divine intervention, because as it so happened, there was one of the best world-renowned book, well, they weren't books, they were binderies. There was a bindery that was out here in Louisville, and the husband and wife that owned the bindery loved what I was doing. And they wanted to help me, and so they charged me prices that, I don't think they made much money, if any money, but they wanted to see me succeed. And they did world-class binding for me. So personal profiles took off. I'm like a rocket ship. And I quickly became this country's foremost family historian.
Oh,
and
interesting.
I loved it. I like you're doing right now.
Yes.
I loved interviewing people. I've always been very inquisitive, and I love old people. And to me, it was my calling. I felt that this is something that I am just called to do. So everybody says, well, how did you get into publishing? Because obviously I wasn't a publisher. Well, I started getting all these phone calls from people, and they'd say, Millie, my grandfather told me to contact you because he told me that you could publish my children's book or my cookbook or my self-help book. And I'd say, no, that's not what I do. I mean, but they didn't understand the difference. They knew that I was doing books, and Granddad thought I could do anything. It was like, oh, my goodness gracious. And I got so frustrated because I hated telling people that I couldn't help them, but I couldn't. And I didn't know anything about publishing. The only thing I knew about publishing in the early 90s was it was in New York. Yeah. I knew the big publishers were in New York. So I decided that I would just call New York and I would find someone that I could refer these people to. So I started calling all the big houses, and that was back during the days where people had to answer their phone when it rang. So I actually got to talk to a lot of people at the publishing.
So in that novel, they answer the phone when it rang versus...
Well, and I'm so glad that nobody knows that was me, because now that I look back on it, I was asking such a dumb question. It was like, well, I just need a name of somebody that can publish the books for these people. It just seemed simple enough, but no, it wasn't. Well, what really decided my future and my fate was I ended up talking to a gentleman who showed me a traditional publishing contract. Okay. And I read it, and I said to him, I'm really, really, really confused because nobody would ever sign this. Oh. And I think he might have been a little insulted. Right. And he said, well, why would you say that? And I said, well, because I read it. And number one, the author makes no money. I mean, we're talking about 7, 8, 9% of net. Right. They have to give up all their rights. And I think business people at least understand the value of intellectual property. Right. They are not involved in the process. And to make it worse, they have to have a literary agent who negotiates on their behalf, because the publishers, and I was told this by some very knowledgeable people, invented literary agents so they would not have to deal with those creatives. And I thought, this is not, I can't imagine. This is publishing. And I said, so now I'm just so confused because nobody's going to sign this contract. And he said, well, you're so wrong because everybody signs it. Interesting. So I had to ask him the $1 million, $60 million question. And I said, why would anybody, I might have said in their right mind, knowing me, sign such an egregious contract? And he said, because they have no choice. Right. And I said, you mean this is publishing? And he said, yes. And so that started the wheels turning. And you know what they say in the business world, you find a need to fill. Right. And go for it. That's amazing. And I just found my need. I found a need in the publishing world. And so I created Brown Books Publishing Group in 1994. I trademarked a new era in publishing. Not that I'm a legend in my own mind or anything, but I was going to change the publishing world because and when I say change it, I'm being facetious, because basically what I wanted to do was to give authors an option. Instead of signing that contract that I would never have signed. Right. Now they have an option. They can still sign a traditional contract, but I created Brown Books, and I said, what I'm going to do, I'm going to create a publishing house that is going to allow the authors to retain the rights. I'm going to work with them because I love working with the authors. To me, that's the secret sauce to everything that I do, that working to create a book that they're going to be as proud to receive as I am to publish. And that was pretty much my business model all those years ago. The stumbling block was the publishing world at large did not see things my way.
Right.
And I was, and that kind of makes me sad because I had no champions. Not one person that I ever talked to in publishing when I would tell them that I was a publisher and that I had a different business model. They assured me that I could not be a publisher, and that's not how it was done. And so I'm just proud of the fact that I am very persistent and insistent, and I had thought it through. This wasn't a whim. I knew that it could be successful. I just didn't realize how difficult they were going to make it for me, and they did. But the right people caught on, and the right authors. When I say the right people, the right authors realized that this was something that was really good for them.
Right.
And those that were inclined to, had grown up thinking that they wanted to get that big contract from the big publishing house to be validated. And that's a lot of what writers want. And there's nothing wrong with that you get the contract. Well, forget about the fact that you're not going to make any money.
Right.
See, I'm more focused on the business of it. I want to make money, and I want my authors to make money. So my business model is not for everybody.
That is really fascinating for me. So I loved hearing that story. The music industry is not that far different.
Yes.
Those contracts don't help or work in the favor of the musician. We see these big names, and I've heard this story from so many different groups in that industry. We see these big name people, and we think they must be super wealthy. Nope. And they're not. They have to pay for their own travel for the concerts, and it comes out of the money that they would make, and it's so not equal.
No. The first time I heard, and this was again in the 90s, and I remember hearing that the Dixie Chicks, I don't know if they filed for bankruptcy or they were having financial problems. I read that or heard that somewhere, and I thought, the Dixie Chicks? Oh my goodness gracious. Right. But you're right. And I have had so many people throughout the years say the same thing, that, a lot of the big recording studios get a hold of them when they're just starting out, and they rope them into those contracts that they can't get out of.
They can't get out of, and they make no money at it.
It's same thing with publishing, and that's one of the things that I'm most proud of is that I have liberated authors from having to sign. Now, they can still choose to sign, and I'm going to talk out of both sides of my mouth, but if the big publishing house comes to an author and offers them that $1 million contract and they want to come to me, I'd say, are you crazy? Or, hey, take the money and run.
Right.
But 99.9% of the time, they're not going to get that $1 million contract if they're a no name, even though they're a good writer. There's a lot of good writers out there. So they're going to have to prove themselves. And if they're willing to invest in themselves, and that's what I look for, somebody that they really, really believe in what they have, and their failure is not an option.
Right.
That's my author, because I'll bring everything that they need. They just have to bring the intellectual property, but then again, they're going to have to be the engine that drives the machine.
Sure.
They're the ones that are going to have to go out there. They have to do the talks. They have to do the signings. They have to, and they should love it. I mean, you're talking about something that's important to you, whether it's a personal story or your business acumen.
Now, you're not an attorney, are you?
Me?
Yes, to read those contracts, just for you to identify the contract language. I tell you a quick story. A couple of years ago, I was offered a position to lead this company as president of the company. And when I received the employment agreement, it had, and I've written a lot of employment contracts before, it had a number of sections that just seemed weird. It had these clawback sections that required me to pay them money if I left the company. And it was just really, so I went to the owner of the business, the founder of the business, and I said the same thing that you said. I don't know why anyone would sign this. And he became really upset with me. And so that was then I turned down the opportunity, much like you did. So for you to identify that without being an attorney, but you had the wherewithal from a business perspective to know that this doesn't make sense.
Well, I just knew that I would not have signed that contract because if I'm involved in a business deal, and especially if it's my intellectual property, I understand the value there, and I believe in fair.
Yeah.
And when I looked at a traditional contract, so many times I thought, well, if that had been like 50-50, if they were
Right.
going to give, and that's a round, but I thought, but 7%, 8%,
Right.
9%, that's not even in the ballpark of
Right.
anything that would be enticing as far as I'm
Right.
concerned. Because it's and sometimes authors spend years and years and years
do.
crafting their manuscript.
Right.
So, what is their value? What is their time worth? And, as I said, I consider them my secret sauce because if they really, really believe in it, they'll get out there and they will work and they will make it happen. I bring everything that they need. Today, I have all the PR, the marketing, the distribution, the social
wow.
media.
Okay.
There isn't, and that was my goal. That was my plan from the very beginning. I wanted to create a company that would afford authors. It would give them everything that they needed for ultimate success. The only thing that I don't have as of today, and I'm working on it, is book to film.
Okay.
I don't have the Hollywood connections.
Right.
I have a lot, and you have to watch out when you're in that.
Sure.
Yeah, everybody just tells you all kinds of
Sure.
things.
I have someone for you, by the way. We can talk off air.
Okay, I might have book to film.
we should talk about it. So what made you think that you can compete against those big publishers? Because that's what so many of our listeners will want to know as entrepreneurs. And that's the question I often ask. It takes a lot of strength to think, all right, I'm going to start from scratch and compete against these companies that have been doing it for a long time.
Well, and that is something every once in a while I reflect back on those days and I ask myself that, what was I thinking? And, I number one, this is my motto in the business world, and it's, who knows, it might end up being the title of my memoir.
Right.
Ignorance is bliss.
Sure.
I just have an ability to go for it. If I believe in something, there is no stopping me. If I believe in something, as I said, failure is not an option.
Right.
And I know that I'm going to hit roadblocks. I know that there's going to be a lot of challenges. I have never been afraid of something not working out as I had planned, because that's part of the plan.
Right.
And I'm sort of, I'm very, I'm totally someone who just makes things happen.
Nice.
And I don't, when it comes to, like, a lot of people won't start a business without a business plan. Now that's not me. I conceive of an idea, and I've got, lots. I won't digress, but if I have an idea that I believe is a winner, I'm just going to go for it. I'm not going to sit around and try to talk myself out of it, or I'm not going to talk to 1,000 other people and hear all the naysayers, because most people will try to talk you out of a good idea.
They will.
And I think that is just advice I would give to anybody starting a business, is if you believe in it in your heart, that and I won't say can't fail, because everything can fail, but you have to be nimble enough to pivot. You have to know when, all right, I've been going down this road now for how long now, what, and then you have to turn and
go for it.
And just keep going and going and going, and roll up your sleeves and be in it for the long run.
That's amazing.
And that's as I said, it's just something that, I think it's just how, I don't know if it's nature or nurture.
Right.
But I didn't sit in a classroom and someone tell me how to run a business. I know how to be successful. And I don't think it's all that difficult, but it takes a lot of hard work, a lot of determination, and you just have to keep on keeping on until things start falling into place. And
I had a conversation last week with someone regarding this project that I'm working on, and the person that I spoke to, I was looking at some of her background and information, and on the profile, she had a marketing agency early in her career, and on her profile, she said, "I am described as the get it done girl," quote unquote. I was so impressed with how she defined her. You reminded me of this. She knows what she wants, and she goes and tries to execute on it. No, she's not reevaluating, trying to talk herself out of it. She says, I am the get it done girl. And I thought that was really neat at how she framed her world and herself.
Yep.
In that process. Yeah.
Well, I started my career in corporate America, and I think that knowing nothing about the world and knowing nothing about business, but what I did realize that corporate America would have killed my soul.
Okay.
That I was not a corporate person. And I think I realized that in my early 20s. And then I made a goal that I wanted to make my first million before 30 years of age.
Right.
And I didn't succeed until I was 31. And I thought I was the biggest loser. I mean, I was not happy.
Right.
Because I didn't meet my goal.
Right.
Today I look back on that and I think, so being hard on yourself and really having, the staying power to make sure that you never give up and you never give in and you just go for whatever it is that, what is the old saying? If you can believe it, you can achieve it, and just all those.
So, Millie, what did you do in the corporate world?
I started out, my very first job, I started as a receptionist.
Okay.
And then I worked my way up to secretary.
Okay.
And then I worked my way up to head of the sales department for Hilton Hotels Corporation in Pittsburgh. I was in the hotel business, and I loved it.
Wow.
It was, to me, I have no doubt in my mind that if I had stayed with Hilton Hotels, I would be running the corporation today, or at some juncture,
Sure.
I probably. But it was just an industry. It had all the things that I love: working with people, very people oriented.
Right.
But when I left Hilton Hotels, I had 4 business cards, and I was still in my 20s.
Right.
I was director of agency and tour sales. I was executive business services manager. I handled state, local, national, regional conventions, and I was Lady Hilton, which was that was nothing. That was just women were starting to travel at that point in time, and so I was working with all the women's programs. But I left because, and I'm so thankful that I knew me. I was getting to know me, and my boss kept. When my boss came to me one day and told me not to come in on the weekends anymore, and I said, why? I mean, that's when I get most of my work done, because during the week I'm just running around, I'm talking to people, I'm calling on clients, I'm just busy. So on the weekend, that's when I got the work done.
You can catch up, right?
Yeah, and he said, well, the staff is starting to grumble because they're afraid that I'm going to start requiring them to come in on the weekends.
Oh, wow.
And I thought, and I didn't know, I'm like 25 years of age. And I thought, you know what? If I was the big boss, I think I would handle it differently. I would want them starting to come in on the weekend. But he chose to demotivate me as opposed to handling that. And so I thought, well, and they just, the corporate world was just not working for me. That I just started realizing that I was different, and I really cared, and I didn't, I loved what I did, and I wasn't working for the money. I was working for the personal satisfaction.
Absolutely.
And so that was, I'm just glad that I realized that and thought, if I stay in corporate America, I'm going to have to turn me off at 8:30 in the morning, and then I can turn me back on at 5 o'clock when I leave. And I thought, do I want to live my life like that?
Right.
And I thought, nope.
Now, I had a chance to visit the first Hilton Hotel in Cisco, Texas.
Oh.
And it's interesting. It's a small little hotel right next to the railroad. And then a few weeks ago, I was with some of the corporate people at Hilton. And I realized something. They'd just done a promo piece with Paris Hilton.
Oh.
And I asked some of the younger people, are they familiar with Paris Hilton? So that Gen Z, they have no idea who she is.
Oh, really?
They had no idea.
Oh, my.
I found that they knew who Kim Kardashian was. And Kim Kardashian and Paris are really good friends. And Kim Kardashian worked for Paris Hilton early in her career. But I thought that was fascinating. Times have changed just from, a few years ago. But they didn't know who Paris Hilton was.
Well, I worked at the Pittsburgh Hilton Hotel, which was was told to me was Conrad Hilton's favorite hotel, and it was beautiful. It's right on the point there in Pittsburgh.
Right.
And the hotel, I've been back there since and just walked around, and of course everybody's gone, and there was nobody to see. But I'm so glad that I just I followed my instinct, and I think that's again getting to know yourself and getting to what feels right to you, and and taking risk. That's the other equation that a lot of people just can't handle, and that's okay. And that's why with my authors in today's world, I can't work with anyone that doesn't understand risk reward, because they're going to be investing in themselves. And so let's make it happen. And if they are up for it, but if they're just risk adverse, they'll be miserable and they'll make me miserable.
So what was your first book that you published?
Oh, golly, the first one. You would think, remember I said I didn't know anything about publishing. Okay, so I sort of stepped into, as a matter of fact, I will have to preface my statements with this fact. I have a gentleman who is very entrenched in the traditional publishing world, and he loves to tell all of his friends in New York when he introduces me that Millie taught herself publishing.
Okay.
And then their eyes get like saucers. It's like, how could she have done that? Like, all right, really, it's not that. It's not that. The process is not. It's not like coding. I could not teach myself coding, I don't think. But publishing, I get it. And I was already doing books when I started, because of my personal profiles. Then I transitioned into Brown Books, and I knew how to bring a book together, and I had editors and writers and designers and proofers. So I was kind of going down that road. But the fact that I educated myself, and I would get on a plane almost every week, and I would go to conferences and seminars and just be the worst seminar in my life. I remember sitting, it was a printing seminar. I didn't really totally understand the difference between printing and publishing at that point in time, and I sat in a 1 hour lecture on the difference between cold glue and hot glue. I wanted to blow my brains out. It's like,
that's funny.
Oh, it was horrible.
Yeah.
But so I learned the business the hard way. I just went out there and asked a lot of questions and talked to a lot of people and forged my own little trail.
Nice.
And I was doing my own thing anyway. So, I bounced around and put all the pieces together. And it took me about 8-9 years before I was ever able to get distribution.
Gotcha.
And that really turned the corner for me. Once, and it was hard, because they kept turning me down. And finally, the last time the Ingram Book Group, who's the 800-pound gorilla in the industry, they turned me down, and I was kind of ticked at that point in time. And I said to the representative who told me no, and I said, okay, I want to know why. You've seen my books, you've seen the quality and the caliber of my authors. And my books, if you covered up the spine, you wouldn't be able to tell the difference between my books and a book that came out of Random House. And so why did you turn me down? And he started stuttering, and I said, okay, no, I want to know. I really want to know the answer. And he said, well, it's because you're different. And I said, different, really different. Okay. And I hung up the phone, and I had steam coming out of my ears. And so I called Ingram, and I said, I want to talk to the president of Ingram Book Group. And lo and behold, he answered the phone. And I thought, oh, no. I had not a minute to prepare. I didn't know what I was going to say. He's on the phone now. And now I'm just like, okay, Mr. Ingram, I'm Milli Brown, and I own a publishing company in Dallas, Texas. And let me tell you a little bit about who I am and what I do. And I'm a publisher, but I have a different business model that you may not be familiar with. So I told him the whole story, and I said, I just got turned down again for distribution, and I just want to share with you a little story that I go to the bookstores all the time, and I'm always in bookstores, and when I'm in there, I buy more books than I'll ever read. But that means usually behind people that are checking out, and so I'm privy to a lot of conversations. And one thing I have to share with you that I've never heard is I've never heard a customer ask the person behind the counter, "Excuse me, could you tell me this money that I'm paying you today, where is it going? Is it going to the author, or does it go to the publisher, or do they split it like 75-25 or 90-10, or how does that work?" And I said, "You know why I've never heard that conversation? Because the consumer doesn't care who paid for what. They just want a good book."
Right.
And so if the consumer, the VIP, the most important person, doesn't care, why do you care?
Right.
And that got me distribution.
Really?
He
listened to you?
Yep.
Oh my. Okay.
Well, and I said a lot more,
sure,
but
sure.
but basically it was a logical argument because he makes money by selling books.
Right.
I produce good books that sell.
Right.
So you could be making money off of me and my books.
Now, Millie, I don't know if you remember this, but how long was that conversation? Do you know, was it a minute or like 10 minutes, 30 minutes?
Oh my God. I never thought about that. I was in such a state of frenzy because first of all, I had not prepared for it. I had not even envisioned it. I'd never thought about calling Mr. Ingram before.
Right. And I ask, and you don't have to recall, but I ask because just the idea of him staying on the call and deciding to listen to you and the entire story is just incredible. I wonder what he was thinking. Like, okay, I'm going to listen to Millie Brown, and I don't know who she is, but she's not Simon & Schuster or a random.
No. I don't. Yeah, correct.
Right.
Yeah. I have no idea. I've never thought about it, but I'll bet it didn't last more than 10 minutes.
Okay. That's a long time to get a CEO of a big business on. That's impressive. Because it sounds like you did well articulating your message, though, which is good.
Or maybe he had nothing else to do. When I called, maybe I caught him at a good time.
That's too funny.
I have no idea, but it worked, and I've never looked back. And today I have a core group of sales reps that go out all over the country. I've got about 50 salespeople that traverse this country selling books door to door, store to store. We have a very impressive catalog that goes out to all of the people in the country who buy actually in the world, who buy books for a living.
Amazing.
They look forward to getting we have 2 seasons, so every time a catalog comes out, they always look and see what books they would like to buy. So, in combination with the PR, the marketing, getting the word out, we're identical to the big houses. The only thing that's different is the fact that it's a different business model. But we do everything. I could only reinvent so much.
Right.
I knew I was going to have to play ball in their ballpark.
So looking back now, how many titles have you produced in books?
I have been asked that question before, and I honestly, I keep looking to the future. I don't know. Okay. Thousands,
That's incredible. You're so modest, by the way.
Well, thank you. But I backed off counting, and let me tell you why.
Sure.
A number of years ago, and I'm going to say maybe 10 years ago, I was getting caught up on the wheel of, okay, if I publish 70 books this year, that means next year I need to publish 80 books or 90 books or 100 books. And then after that, and because that's how you run a business.
Sure.
But then I started realizing I cannot publish a book that is not a good book.
Right.
So I turn, and a lot of people might think I'm not a very good businesswoman because I turn down more books than I publish. And I charge. So I'm not inclined to take someone's money if, number one, it's going to tarnish my brand, and it's not going to do them any good, and it's not going to sell, and then that's bad publicity. It all works out in the end. But I couldn't set any kind of a goal in that regard because I might have, the next 50 people I talk to, their books are really not what I'm looking for.
Right.
So I can't just say next year I'm going to double the volume of books. So this year, right now, we have 65 books in the queue.
Okay.
Now, for a small independent publisher, and I say small, the last time I talked to an intellectual property attorney, I kept calling myself small, and he kept saying, Millie, you're not small. And I said, yes, I am. And because I'm comparing myself to Simon & Schuster, who publishes thousands of books, but they've been around a lot longer than I have. Maybe in another 200 years, I'll be the size of Simon & Schuster. I'm not there yet. But because we're still growing, because we're still innovating, I'm in my mind, we're not anywhere near where I want to be, but
Well, here's why I ask, and I know we're at the end of this program, but I find it amazing, and I love what you just said. So many companies, as they grow, they're trying to do more than the year before, so they set these artificial numbers versus focusing on the quality and then expanding the quality, because even for small businesses, you can have greater net revenue, you can have greater general income and do better health-wise than bigger companies because you run it very efficiently. You don't have to double or increase every year to prove something artificial, right? You can run a really solid business just by producing quality work.
That is maybe one of the things I'm most proud of, because that proved to be 100% true.
Right.
That all of a sudden our numbers started going up because we were selling more books. Most of my business comes from, number one, referrals, and number two, second books and third books and fourth books by the same author. And that's what's kept me going when we hit recessions and when a pandemic, we were, nobody did well during the pandemic, but we actually kind of benefited. I hate to even say that, because so many people who now had a lot of extra time on their hands and had always thought about writing a book were knocking on my door. So that was downtime for a lot of very productive people.
Right. Well, Millie, we're at the end of our segment. I'm going to have you back on to tell me more. I have so many more questions. You're just a wonderful, wonderful guest on our program. But I wanted to thank you for joining us on Business Decoded.
Well, thank you, Ronnie. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks for joining us on Business Decoded with Ronnie Spellman.
Thank you for listening to Business Decoded podcast with Ronnie Spellman. Please be sure to subscribe and share, and stay tuned for more incredible Business Decoded episodes.